Nelson Mandela passed away yesterday, and we thought this was a good time to reflect on what conservatives thought of Nelson Mandela. And it's not just today, although there are comments from today as well, but from yesteryear when he was actually a controversial figure. Now it's easy to say after he's passed away and brought freedom, democracy to South Africa, liberated the blacks in that country, and protected the whites as a minority after he became president, that everybody agrees with him. Now we've got Republicans saying they agree with him. We've got Bill O'Reilly saying he was a good guy. We got Rick Santorum saying what a lovely guy was. They're ready to co-opt him, right? But back in the day, they didn't love Mandela so much. Do you know that Dick Cheney, among many others, actually voted to keep Nelson Mandela in jail? There was a proposition back in 1985 and 1986 saying we should. It's a non-binding resolution saying, hey, we should urge South Africa to release Nelson Mandela. Dick Cheney said, hell no. Okay, and when he was asked about it 20 years later, of course, Dick Cheney, being who he is, non-apologetic, said the ANC was then viewed as a terrorist organization. I don't have any problems at all with the vote I cast 20 years ago. Now the guy, in that 20 years, you found out that the guy was a legend, that he liberated the country. He brought democracy to South Africa, and he protected your beloved whites. Right? Still, no problem. Yeah, I'm glad I kept that son of a bitch in jail for as long as I could. I mean, who turns around and is like, Gandhi, yeah, I'm glad I voted against that guy, right?
Right, but isn't that Dick Cheney's personality where he's just defiant? And it's like a very sharp contrast to how Democrats are, because Democrats are willing to concede way too quickly, whereas, you know, Dick Cheney is the polar opposite of that. Even if he's wrong, and he knows in the back of his mind that he's wrong, he will refuse to admit that he was wrong.
Oh, I mean, I could see him at the gates of hell and be like, nope, not backing down.
It's amazing.
I thought I didn't like Jesus then, I don't like him now. Okay, so he's like, and then Satan's like, oh, I think it's time to work the dark side. Okay, you wanted to work the dark side, Dick? Well, watch out what you wish for. So anyway, now he's not alone. Here's current congressman today in Congress who voted against freeing Mandela back then, Joe Barton of Texas, Howard Coble of North Carolina, and Representative Hal Rogers of Kentucky. There's a couple others. There was a guy who was a Democrat who switched over to a Republican. But I wanted to give you a broader list too, because some of these guys now, of course, have left office. Mm-hmm. But Dick Cheney, John McCain, Newt Gingrich, Dan Coates, Pat Roberts, Joe Barton again on that list. Dan Coates, Pat Roberts are Republican senators now. Of course, McCain is. Newt Gingrich was a little bit more complicated a figure. He voted against Mandela there, but then later said, yeah, it turns out apartheid's not that great an idea. Maybe as Republicans we should, head in the other direction. He was among 3 breakaway Republicans with Vin Weber, et cetera, saying, maybe we shouldn't be this obviously insanely weirdly racist, right? And so he's a little bit more of a mixed bag. Now you got to understand that the conservative support for the apartheid government of South Africa and against Nelson Mandela has been around forever. Russell Kirk wrote in the National Review, one of the top conservative magazines back in the 1960s, democracy in South Africa would bring anarchy and the collapse of civilization, and the government would be domination by witch doctors, still numerous and powerful, and reckless demagogues. Whereas, of course, the people oppressing the great majority of South Africans, they were not demagogues. They were just lovely people,
Yeah, like if they got control of the South African government, who knows? They probably would have instituted a system of repression and discrimination.
Oh, yeah. Well,
that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah,
it's a good thing they avoided that.
Yeah, but from their perspective, they're like, we did avoid that for the people we care about.
You're right.
Right?
Yeah.
So now you think, well, 1960s guys, come on, that's not fair. All right, I'll catch you up a little bit here. How about 1981, when Ronald Reagan says to Walter Cronkite at the time, it's a country that has stood by us in every war we've ever fought. A country that strategically is essential to the free world in its production of minerals. So there's 2 great parts of that quote. One, he called the apartheid government and said, no, blacks don't have rights. No, we're going to oppress them, we're going to repress them, etc. He said it was essential to freedom.
Yeah.
Get a load of the irony there, right? And unabashed, this Reagan, the beacon, the shining light, right, of liberty and freedom. And second of all, again unabashedly saying, we like their minerals.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So I don't give a shit what they do to black people. I like their diamonds.
I mean, obviously, anybody who is speaking out in support of the government of South Africa at that time, it's easy to see it in racial terms. But I don't think, I mean, I think most of the people that voted against freeing him probably are racist. But I don't think that they voted against it because they're racist. I think that it was strictly a geopolitical thing. I mean, this was, we don't want to allow these people to come into power in South Africa because then they might be more amenable to ties with the Soviet Union. But what I love about that is, fuck the people in South Africa. We don't care at all about what's happening to them or how they're being crushed or how they've been crushed for 300 years at this point. If this means that the Soviet Union will be 3% more influential across the globe, then who cares? And this is the party that's driven by its Christian values.
Yeah.
It's nothing about the people. The people don't matter at all. It's just about us and the Soviet Union.
Christian values and the freedom agenda.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And just going back to the thing about Christian values, you know, I was reading up on Mandela's bio, and there was this little part in there that really stood out to me. You know, he worked with many organizations trying to fight poverty. And there was one organization that he was working with, but it was an atheist organization. And he refused to work with them further because he was a Christian. You know, he would preach to members of the community once a week, and it was something that he was really proud of. So if you're a true Christian and you really believe in your religion, and you vote against this guy, so he continues to be imprisoned, I mean, where are your values there?
Right. And so to go to Ronald Reagan's values, just a little bit more on him, he said, oh, no, it's okay. They've ended segregation in their own country anyway. And then people are like, well, that's actually not remotely true. Mm-hmm. And so he had to walk back that comment. Like, he's like, I don't care, man. I'm anti-Soviet Union. I want the minerals. What lie do I need to tell? And then he said, well, it's not racial policy. It's more tribal policy. Like, well, the tribe of white people I'm in favor of, and the tribe of black people I'm against, right? And by the way, here's more fan favorites from the Republican side that are still around. Advisors to the South African government, Senator Jesse Helms, and now Senator James Inhofe. Okay, so James Inhofe, the biggest global warming denier, etc., bad guy back then. Their top lobbyists at the time, Jack Abramoff.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, these are the same bad guys. Now Abramoff is reformed now, but the same bad guys that have been bad guys all along in the most vicious ways, and they justified it in the same ways. Now, Heritage Foundation. Now we're catching you up to the 1990s. Same themes throughout, right? They write, because they were against freeing Mandela, they say, first, Nelson Mandela is not a freedom fighter. He repeatedly has supported terrorism. Since Mandela's release from prison and his subsequent refusal to renounce violence, the Marxist-dominated ANC has launched terrorism and violence against civilians, claiming several hundred lives. Now, here's a good question as to whether Nelson Mandela should have done an armed resistance against South Africa in the 1960s. Of course, I always ask the question, what would you do if they said you have no rights and we're not going to treat you like human beings and you're going to have to live under this oppression? And by the way, we use force and violence all the time. You don't want to live under that oppression? I'm going to crack your skull. I'm going to throw you in Robben Island for 18 years. I'm going to make you do hard labor for 27 years. And I'm going to kill you if need be. But if you use violence, then we got a lot of trouble, right? Now, look, what I found interesting about that quote is wherever there's an oppressed people, same exact things get trotted out. They're the terrorists. Like, it's not that I'm occupying them. It's not that I'm repressing them. It's not that I'm oppressing them. Whether it's Ireland, Northern Ireland, whether it's Palestine, whether it's South Africa. And people, you want to get offended by that analogy, go ahead, have at it, get offended, okay? Oh, well, look, I built all these settler homes and I got 500,000 people here that I put in there, and then all of a sudden I took a lot of your land and I've been occupying you for 60 years, but you're the goddamn terrorist with all your violence, right? And by the way, okay, you use that against Arafat as they did against Mandela. Okay, I understand that. And I'm against terrorism. And Mandela realized what a bad idea it was and how unproductive it was. But Abbas, the Palestinian leader, hasn't done any terrorism. But nonetheless, same talking points, terrorists, Marxists, communists. And so we just had to keep them repressed for all those years in all those situations. And the English government did it too, and we did it in our own ways against the Indians, etc. And always the savages were the bad guys and we were the good guys.